Welcome everyone. We will start, the process to explaining a few details before starting the virtual event today. Thank you very much for joining, and thank you very much for embracing the awareness effort for standards in European defense and security procurements. Some technical details. All participants are muted and they don't have the opportunity to also to open up the camera, just to save, for the bandwidth and for the speed of the virtual event. As you can see, we have our panelists that they have their cameras activated and they have also the right to intervene. Actually, we will use only the questions and answer part, not the chat, because it don't have the capacity to manage all the chat. So please, if you have a question, please upload it on this questions and answer, and then we will review the questions after the segment of each of the panelists. Also, this webinar, this virtual event is recorded, as you already noted. So if there are any for example, people that they don't wish to be recorded, you can follow this webinar later through the DSA website. Will be also uploaded there with also all the presentations and the material of this webinar. We have together with us, before I will not introduce the lecturers yet, but we have with us Mr. Howard Almas from Norway. Howard, welcome with us. We'll be supporting, the question and answer period. And Howard is a member of the House of Knowledge. House of Knowledge is a Norwegian company dedicated to education and training for IP, IPR, also in standards, amongst others. And this is one of our associates as DSA. And of course, I will introduce our lecturers in a few minutes. I will start now the introduction. Let's see if we can. All right. Some few words about the DSA. We're a non-governmental, non-profit organization. We established 3 years ago under the European law. And actually, our main purpose and scope is to bridge civil and defense standardization stakeholders, to harmonize activities, to raise awareness, to train people actually to build skills on European and NATO defense standardization, and also for providing advice. We have 5 associates, one I mentioned from House of Knowledge. We have also Mr. Maglovsky, the former Deputy Director NSO. The Admiral Kavulakos is a strategy and defense planning admiral, now retired, and also Mrs. Valentina Kordik, which is actually a mentor, entrepreneurship mentor, and counselor. So this is our team. Me, I am a captain retired, Nikolaos Myriounis, with an experience of about 25 years for NATO and European standardization, participating in a number of committees, chairing a number of groups in NATO regarding standardization and in EDA. Our deliverables are we're delivering training and in NATO and EU defense standardization. Recently, we have delivered the training to the NATO Cold Weather Operations Center of Excellence in Norway. Also, we're delivering training for small, medium enterprises in cooperation with TÜV Nord. We had in Greece an event. Also, we're delivering training for defense standards to standards developing organization. We have delivered a breakfast webinar to Standard Nords in Oslo, and also with CYS, the Cyprus standardization organization. We had also another webinar with this organization. Also, we are now delivering digital e-learning for standards. Already, we have in progress a contract for delivering standards learning, and innovative projects. We are building up a serious game about the standardization process that will help people by engaging them to learn the process, even if it's civilian or even go to defense. Also, we're providing advice to a few Horizon research projects by European Union. One of them is the peers regarding CBRN practitioners, and the second, the strategy for crisis management. So participating there as advisors. When we are calling us, we are there for them. And that's a brief presentation about what DSA is doing. And thank you very much for joining us today. Just now, a few words about this event. As you can see here in the fact and figures, this is the full picture of defense spending in NATO. That you can see that about for 2021, 1.2 trillion euros invested in defense. Of course, not all of them are going to equipment. The whole defense expenditure include all expenditure, either for personnel, for forces, but you can see there that 1.2 trillion euros and about 400 billion, more or less, that goes to European countries. And that the majority of the European countries are also NATO nations, or even some NATO nations, as you can see, are applicants to EU, like Albania, Montenegro, North Macedonia, and Turkey. And also some others are participating in the single market of EU. So this is, you can see now that with this amount of money spending for defense, it goes without saying that we need to optimize the use of resources and to also strengthen interoperability and operational effectiveness, which means that we need to have a common set of standards. But if we will go to the next screen, it's not the case for the time being. This slide is being used by Commissioner Mr. Han Bollens, presented in Athens 2 years ago regarding the situation or the comparison between Europe and North America, the United States. And here you can see that there's, especially in the European defense sector, there is fragmentation, huge fragmentation. There's a plethora of systems that do not guarantee interchangeability and interoperability instead of the United States part, as you can see here. So actually, on the other one hand, we have a very strong investment, even the most impressive now with the war in Ukraine for decades for European countries. And on the other hand, you see there's a fragmentation of the material and the defense equipment. And this is now the question for today. That's the reason you will hear later by our colleagues, by Mr. McGloskey, regarding the necessity of standards in nowadays with the current challenges, but also you will hear the perspective by industry by Mr. Claudio Buccini and Ms. Maria Lieva, how industry faces this fragmentation, how industry working for standards to bridge, to take remedial actions. And also by Senelec, we will hear all the contribution by Senelec in this defense and security area, but also in innovation and horizon projects. So this is the reason that we have to call all of these distinguished lecturers today. And here the solution, as you can see on the screen, it's just one way. With no common capability, nations and stakeholders, they have their own, plans and strategies, even from procurement plans to capability development plans. And this is always disoriented, going to different directions. Since we have a common capability development process, which means that we have a common strategy, a common goal, then with a common set of standards, we can ensure interoperability, optimization of resources, and of course, defragmentation of the picture you've seen before of the market. Of course, this is not a very easy way, as you will be also here by the lecturers later. And here, as you can see, a national capability development timeline can go up to 20 years. So it's not an easy effort. It's not a short term. It's actually a mid and long-term requirement to harmonize and to synchronize efforts and goals and set a common set of standards. And these are the tools in Europe about capability-driven approach. You see before that in all these tools, we have the European capability priorities, defense capability priorities, actually started in 2018. They are providing priorities in the defense areas that we need to go together with CDPs. We have also the CARD. CARD is the annual review on defense about how nations can come clusters together to make, to join equipment and acquisition projects, and also the PESCO initiative regarding interoperability, regarding collective efforts for a series of defense, even if it goes to material acquisition or to forces and capabilities. And all these projects, along with EDF, the European Defence Fund, that's billions of euros invested on defense, also supported by the European Commission and the European Defence Agency and the DG DEFIS. And also, this allows nations to join with the support of the Commission in defense projects, common together. The last one is the DIRPA. DIRPA is 2022, is the European actually defense procurement procurement initiative for Common Procurement Act. For it's about 500 million euros dedicated by European Commission to support joint procurement by nations. So these are top-down, capabilities-driven approach tools and vehicles that we need to introduce common standardization requirements, common standards in order to meet interoperability. On the other hand, we have also the industrial strategy, which have all the ecosystems by European Union, as we have in between them. There's also the defense and space ecosystem. We have the action plan in 2021 on synergies between civil and defense and space industry for standards for dual use or hybrid standards. You will hear later about this. And also the late 2022, we have the European standardization strategy, where actually goes for a capability-driven approach and already set up a high-level forum standardization. So you can hear more about this by Mr. Wadenberg. All these documents, capstone documents and tools are provided for a capability-driven approach, which is necessary for bridging all actors together and achieve interoperability. And another one factor that I would like for the introduction is civil vs defense standards. You will hear later a lot. That's the reason we have the Sensenelec here, the core player in Europe for standardization activities, that according to studies by a Sussex study university, but also the European Parliament study on armament standardization, up to 90% of civilian Navy sector standards could, apply to the defense one. 75% of those of aeronautic, 70% of those in land sectors. So you can see that just a small part remains to develop military or specific standards for military application. The rest of the standards are out there. So we need to look as civil as possible, military as necessary, but always with a caution if the civil standard is suitable enough and is tailored for military application, because there are a lot of cases that we have selected the civil standard, which is actually was not suitable for military application. And if you can see there that estimation of product cost savings following more intensive use of civil standards by military sector range from 10 to 50%, which give a clear message that if we can use off-the-shelf standards, we can save money from the defense budget or reallocate money to new programs. So this is the introduction, the philosophy of what we're going to hear today. And of course, the aim of this event is to increase awareness of standards in defense and security procurements and strengthen cooperation between the standardization stakeholders of the communities. The key reference documents, as you've seen before, are available by the DSA website, but also by the websites of the official organizations. Policy and strategy are by EDA, which actually EDA are classified. You need to ask your MOD. But all the others, the industrial strategy, the action plan, the standardization strategy, the NATO joint declaration, are all available on the web, are free on the web. But we can come back later to them while we will have the presentations. And now you can see our lecturers. We will start with Mr. Maglovsky, former retired, is the former Deputy Director, NATO Standardization Office, and for a long period, a synonym of standardization. in the defense community. So it's a great honor for having you with us, Dieter. Thank you very much for being here. Of course, he has a strong resume. Yeah, and all his background is posted on the DSA website. He has awarded by medals in Germany, in the United States as an instructor, as also a huge, also in experience in lessons learned in JALC, Portugal, in a number of all positions and all courses. And also he holds also a master degree in science. So there's a great resume of Mr. Maglovsky. After that, we will have Mr. Luc Vanderberg, as you can see on the screen. Mr. Vanderberg is the leader on the CCMC of the coordination committee in Senelec. Thank you very much, and also in innovation and market perspectives. Thank you very much for having with you, Mr. Vanderberg, here with us. And later we'll go to the legislation of standards and the tools that we have for defense procurement. And then we will go to the real picture of industry and the perspective on industry by Mr. Claudio Buccini as a leader and as the first of the academy, Naval Academy, with a huge also resume of being in a NATO, of leading industrial committees, naval officer, also owner of a company as a part of Fricanderi, if I'm not wrong. And nowadays also he's the vice chair of the committee, coordination committee of ASD Europe regarding the project management of all products in ASD Europe. And we will have Mr. Palia Ilieva, the director of ASD STAN. Is the unique organization recognized as the main pillar of delivering airspace standards for Europe through Senelec, of course, and also recognized internationally with a great experience. Thank you very much, Mr. Ilieva, for being with us. And we will close with the best practices, how all stakeholders can join forces and cooperate together for standards, for using best practice standards. This is the outline of what we're going to see and hear today. And with by saving time, I will give the floor now. I will stop sharing the screen, and I will give the floor to Mr. Maglovsky for his introduction about the role of standardization in the European defense abilities. So, Mr. Maglovsky, the floor is yours. Honored. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Nick, for your kind introduction, and first of all, for inviting me as a keynote speaker to this virtual event. I personally, of course, when I look at standards, I look at standards through the NATO lens. So I look at standardization from the NATO perspective and from the perspectives and the requirements of NATO commanders or military commanders and warfighters in the field. What do they need to be successful in a multinational operation? And this is, the focus of my lead-in remarks here. I will also address, based on my experience gained as Deputy Director of the NATO Standardization Office, a few key challenges for military standardization as I see them. Of course, I will not address all of them, but I would like to emphasize a few which are of concern from my perspective. Before I go into the importance of standardization, let me start with a few words about Russia's war against Ukraine and the consequences for European and NATO's military capabilities. One point I want to make right at the beginning, let's be clear about it. The war did not start in February last year. It started already with Russia's annexation of Crimea and the attacks in eastern Ukraine a couple of years ago. And of course, we have to ask ourselves, okay, did the West react in the right way at that time? Have we been able to deter Russia from actually, further attacking and invading into Ukraine? Obviously, there was no deterrence there. When we look at the war today, I would argue it's probably impossible to predict when and how this war will end. What we should clearly realize, though, from the Western perspective and the NATO perspective is that Putin clearly wants a different Europe. He sees democracy as a threat to Russia. And this is something we need to keep in our mind. Even if the war against Ukraine ends, I think we have to accept that the security situation in Europe has changed permanently. There will be no way back, at least not in the foreseeable future. So what are the consequences for European and NATO military capabilities? Well, Europe and NATO will have to deter, first and foremost, Russia from attacking EU or NATO member countries. And if deterrence fails, Europe and NATO has to be able to defend European and NATO territory against Russia in a high intensity war. Deterring Russia from attacking EU or NATO nations requires first and foremost credible military deterrence and defense capabilities. They have to be at high readiness, prepared and able to deploy and engage on short notice. And that is something which we have to realize and what has changed when we compare the years after the Cold War, when NATO and EU was focusing more on out-of-area missions. There was plenty of time to prepare for such a mission. If we have to defend against Russia, we have to go as we are. So that means interoperability has to be there right at the beginning, and we cannot try to achieve interoperability in a long preparation time. In a war against Russia, Europe's military contributions will have to be integrated into NATO's military capabilities. Nick already mentioned that at the beginning, that the majority of EU countries are also NATO members. And if we have to defend Europe or NATO territory, it will be NATO to engage against Russia. So what does that mean? When we look at NATO, at EU military standardization, it cannot be seen in isolation. It requires harmonization and alignment with NATO standards and NATO standardization activities. And I will come back to that point later in my remarks. For successful deterrence and defense against Russia, interoperability among military contributions is crucial. In fact, when we look at the current landscape, security landscape, the need for interoperability has grown considerably due to the changing landscape, but also due to new and emerging technologies. And NATO nations and EU nations certainly have to invest more in standardization. Standards are crucial for successful integration of small national contingents in a larger fighting force. So you have to have the right standards in place. And when you look at NATO's high readiness maneuver forces, they are increasingly multinational, even at the tactical level. What does it mean? It means that small land maneuver elements rely on combat.
Dieter, I'm sorry, you are muted. I'm sorry, apologies.
Yeah.
Just great, sorry.
Okay. So when you look at that dependency, it requires not only common procedures, it also requires exchangeability, for instance, of ammunition, exchangeability of spare parts. And what certainly is required, a standardized communication network. So all these elements have to be able to share the same common picture and have to be able to exchange information amongst each other. So when I look at defense standardization, I would like to emphasize 3 points today. The first one is that standards have to meet the requirements of military commanders and soldiers engaged in military operations. And they have to be kept relevant. So we have to look at our standardization portfolio and need to identify whether they are still relevant or not, whether they might have to be adjusted due to new emerging technologies. The second point I want to make is standards need to be used. NATO calls it, they have to be implemented by nations. And the last point I want to make, and I want to elaborate on, is EU defense standards and standardization activities have to be harmonized and coordinated with NATO standards and NATO activities related to standardization. That's an important point I want to make. Let me come back to my first point. Standards need to be kept relevant. This requires constant work on existing standards to align them with new policy and concepts, but also new emerging technology. NATO has a pretty large standardization portfolio developed over 70 years of standardization. Nevertheless, what I saw in my position in NATO is that we lack national participation, national subject matter experts in the various working groups to keep NATO's standardization portfolio up to date and to react to new standardization requirements. Standardization, in particular, when you look at fast-moving technologies like information technology, but also new and emerging technologies, requires close cooperation between military subject matter experts on one hand, but also civil standard development organizations and defense industry. This definitely is an area for improvement. When you look at NATO standardization working groups, in most of these working groups, military subject matter experts work in isolation. So we need to look at better ways to bring all stakeholders, particularly in the field of armament standardization, together in these working groups. So it is an area where both sides, NATO and the EU, have to look into better ways to align and get all stakeholders on board. Concerning my second point, I would like to stress that as long as standards solely exist on paper, they really do not help us to achieve the required level of interoperability. They only work as force enabler or building brick for interoperability if they are really used by nations. When we look at reality, I must state that multinational exercises very often demonstrate that even existing NATO standards are not fully implemented by NATO allies. And when you look at the support Ukraine has received from the various NATO members and European members, there are also signs that NATO armaments are not fully standardized. So we even make that experience in Ukraine right now. So allies, nations have to pay more attention to the implementation of standards. And we need to find ways to encourage nations to really focus on the implementation of standards. Standardization implementation is voluntary. I'm very well aware of it, and we cannot actually force nations, but we should look for better ways to encourage nations to use military standards. And that includes armament standards, but also operational standards, standardized procedures. Let me get to my last area of concern, the cooperation between EU and NATO standardization. 21 EU members or member states are also members of NATO. Military capabilities of these nations will have to be integrated into NATO's fighting elements should NATO have to defend, for instance, against Russia. When we look at recent EU and NATO joint declarations, it is clear that members both of the European Union and NATO expect close cooperation on military standardization by both organizations. And I have seen several steps been taken to enhance information exchange between both of these organizations. When I look at NATO, NATO has a very robust organization for the development and maintenance of defense standards in place. More than 200 working groups are working under the NATO umbrella on military standardization. These groups are certainly indispensable. They bring military subject matter experts together, facilitate networking, and allow nations to bring in their specific expertise and interest into the standardization process. However, as I mentioned before, several of these standardization working groups lack national support. So nations need to invest a little bit more into these working groups. And they consist mostly of military subject matter experts. So EU military standardization efforts should take into account ways to enhance EU active participation in these working groups, bring the European perspective into the NATO standardization groups. And moreover, the European Union and NATO should explore ways to enhance cooperation using existing structures in order to enhance cooperation with civil standard development organizations and industry in these groups. And the last point I want to make is also for this group of participants here, it is NATO's policy to use non-NATO standards first and foremost. So if there is a requirement identified in NATO for standardization solutions, yeah, NATO's policy is to look out first and check whether civil standards or non-NATO standards could meet these gaps and fill these gaps and meet the requirements. And a better cooperation between SDOs, industry, and military subject matter experts could certainly be helpful there. Well, I guess I stop here, subject to your questions, and thank you for your attention.
Great, Dieter, thank you very much. Thank you very much for, actually, it was my apologies that I didn't make clear that Mr. McCloskey will just deliver a keynote speech with no slide, because I received some questions by our colleagues, our participants, about the slides. But no, this was just a keynote speech by Mr. McCloskey, not supported by slide. If you want to see more about, the meaning and some more details about what Mr. McCloskey said, a part of it at least, that is also available through the NSO website for the 70 years of NATO standardization, where you can see, how do you say, a very comprehensive speech by Mr. McCloskey there, also related to our virtual event today. Not exactly. Today we heard by Mr. McCloskey also the importance of implementation of standards, and also the importance of how EU and NATO will engage and harmonize together efforts for interoperability, strengthen interoperability for common standards, which is the key message. I don't see any questions yet on the screen. We can also have the panel later, if you can have the luxury to have with us Mr. McCloskey later on the panel discussion. We can sum up, please, all participants with this remarkable number of 188 participants, which is really more than expected. We're very happily welcome all these colleagues to our event today. So if there is no the case of having questions for Mr. McCloskey, I don't see anything on the question on any question on the chat box. Then I would like to thank Mr. McCloskey that your message was sound and clear. We have the war in our front yard, and we need to do more to be interoperable, to be all together as a one force in order to achieve a force multiplier through standardization. Even it goes from NATO, from Europe to NATO, so these organizations should be work complementary towards one goal. So thank you very much, Mr. McCloskey. And now I will I will stop sharing my screen, and it will give me just 1 minute. If it is not the case, I don't see any questions. So we will go to our next topic. Now, from this message by Mr. McCloskey, we'll go to the broader view of standardization in Europe. The main stakeholder is CENELEC, is the European Standards Organization defined by the Commission. And we have the privilege to welcome Mr. Luc van den Berg, as I mentioned before. Let me share the presentation of Mr. van den Berg. So it's about the CENELEC, all right, this is done. No, this is the ASD stand. Just give me, apologies, just give me some minutes. To open the presentation of Mr. van den Berg. All right. Thank you. CENELEC. All right, so I will try to share it now. Share CENELEC. If you can tell me if you've seen the full screen, the presentation of Mr. Van den Berg, do you see it? The full screen, great. So, Mr. Van den Berg, the floor is yours. You're welcome.
Okay, thank you, Nikolaos. If you can go to the next slide.
Yes.
Considering the next slide, please.
You don't see the contents now?
Sorry, Nikolaos, you're not in full screen yet.
I'm not in full screen.
Not in full screen.
All right, I will try to do it again. Apologies. Just to share the screen. All right, let's. Now, do you see a full screen yet or not?
Oh, you had it.
Yes, the contents.
It was there, but now it went back to the PowerPoint overview.
Now you see the slides on the full screen.
Not full screen, no.
All right, just give me apologies for the technical detail. Let's. I will do. All right, I know what I have to do. Just sharing my screen, and then I will. I think that now you can see the full screen.
Yes.
Apologies.
Perfect.
All right, problem solved. Please, look, apologies.
Yeah, Nikolaos, if you can go to to this slide. So considering the title of my presentation, I did split my presentation into 3 parts, starting with introducing SEN and SENELEC, and then move into the activities for the defense sector that we organized in the past. I will then briefly describe how SEN and SENELEC relate to the European standardization strategy, and will finish by presenting the various ways that standardization needs in support of innovation come to SEN and SENELEC. So next slide. Let me start how SEN and SENELEC exist within the overall standardization landscape. The most important aspect to note is that SEN and SENELEC are, together with ETSI, the European standards organizations that are recognized by the EU. I will, in what follows, refer to ESOs. This recognition means that SEN and SENELEC can be invited by the Commission to produce European standards in support of the EU policies through so-called standardization requests, formerly also known as standardization mandates. I will briefly come back on this later in my presentation. How do SEN and SENELEC organize the standardization process? Thus, how do stakeholders get the standards that they need? SEN and SENELEC operate through the national delegation principle. This means that the European standardization process is based on national delegations of the 34 member countries of SEN and SENELEC. They decide on our standards work program, as well as on the standards resulting from it. These national delegations represent the views of mirror groups that are convened at the national level, where all stakeholders then can directly participate. The 34 member countries of SEN and SENELEC are shown on the right-hand side of the slide for your information. This same national delegation principle is also applicable at the international level, in ISO and in IEC, the International Electrotechnical Commission. SEN and SENELEC have agreements with respectively ISO and IEC that enable there is consistency between the European and international standards. How is this done? Well, technical discussions between the experts of the national standards bodies take place only once. Typically, today this is at the international level in ISO or IEC, but our respective agreements then enable to accept the European standard at the same time as the international standard through a parallel voting process. So technical discussions are taking place only once, but are leading to an international standard as well as a European standard. A final comment on the slide. I should add that ETSI operates for its work a direct participation model, and the standardization world, of course, also includes many other standards developing organizations. But this is beyond the scope of this presentation. So next slide, Nicolaus. Next slide. Yeah. Coming back to the possibility that an international standard and an identical EN exist. And EN is the abbreviation of European standard here. What is the added value of having also this EN? Well, this is because an EN, a European standard, needs to be implemented into identical national standards of our 34 member countries. This is not the case for the international standards by ISO or IEC. Because of this characteristic, the EN is a strong support tool for the single market. The Commission even indeed asks the ESOs to produce ENs in support of their policies. They do this through issuing to us standardization requests, which the ESOs can agree to accept. The ENs produced in response to such standardization requests are so-called harmonized standards. Compliance with the harmonized standards automatically also makes the complying products to comply with the related directive or regulation, a fact that is known as presumption of conformity. Harmonized standards are therefore making it easier for industry to ensure that products are okay to enter the single market. In addition to ENs, CEN and CENELEC also have other standards deliverables shown on the slide, which may be a preferred approach in less mature situations. Next slide then, Nicolaus. Considering today's audience, I also wanted to take the opportunity to present some activities that were undertaken in CEN and CENELEC in support of defense sector needs. Our links with the defense sector go back more than 20 years, when the CEN workshop on defense procurement, CEN workshop 10 this was, produced a list of standards and specifications that were considered useful by the defense sector for defense procurement purposes. This activity, started in CEN workshop 10, is now being further progressed under EDA in the form of the EDSTAR database. In addition to the workshop 10 activities, CEN created at that time a group under its technical board with the aim to investigate any standardization needs that could be addressed by a standards body such as CEN. This group was also meant to be the CEN interface with defense interests, including NATO and later also EDA. The group later became a CEN-CENELEC group, known as SFDPS, and even a CEN-CENELEC ETSI group, known as DSEG. Considering that this kind of groups did not have the remit to produce any standards themselves, a proposal was made to create a CEN-CENELEC technical committee that would create these standards, replacing the SEG. Proposal to this effect, and we are 2019 now, failed. Discussions to recreate a group where defense interests can interface with various standardization committees producing defense sector relevant standards have taken place since then. Similarly to the existing sector forum on security, the objective still is to create a sector forum on defense. Next slide, please. Coming now to the EU strategy on standardization as described in the Commission's communication of 2 February last year. The document being 10 pages long, I will address it very much from a CEN-CENELEC perspective. Maybe the most important element from the communication is the creation of the high-level forum, which brings together high-level representatives of member states, of standardization bodies, of industry, of civil society, and of academia, with the aim to support the Commission in meeting the ambitions of the strategy. CEN and CENELEC both participate here through their presidents. The first meeting of the high-level forum was on 20 January last. The preparatory work will happen through Sherpa groups, which again have participation of CEN and CENELEC. A link to the first Sherpa meeting, which took place on 10th January, is on the slide. In addition, the Commission established an EU Excellent Hub on standards to better coordinate and leverage the existing standardization expertise scattered within the Commission. The hub will operate under the steer of a Chief Standardization Officer, Ms. Maïve Route, Deputy Director General in DG Grow. In this context, Ms. Route met with senior managers of the CEN-CENELEC Management Center on 13 January last. The standards as needed in the Commission's strategic areas are reflected in the annual Union Work Programme on Standardization and form the basis of standardization requests to the ESOs. A link to the draft for 2023 will be shown later in this presentation. It was further good to see the endorsement of the national delegation principle, which is at the basis of the CEN and CENELEC operation. It got confirmed by a recent amendment of the regulation, and for this I refer to the bottom of the slide, an amendment that explicitly states that each ESO shall ensure that certain decisions concerning European standards are taken exclusively by representatives of the national standardization bodies. The policy also stresses the importance of involving small and medium enterprises, civil society, and users. This was already in Regulation 1025, where reference was made to a number of organizations covering SMEs, civil society, and users, which can receive EU finance to contribute to standardization. Regulation 1025 requires that the participation of these organizations is supported and facilitated by the ESOs. For CEN and CENELEC, this means that these organizations are partner organizations, which gives them a number of rights in our system. The strategy further stresses the importance of influencing global standards setting. The ambition is to strengthen Europe's voice in global standardization. Europe, through the national standards bodies of its countries, had a strong position in the past, but today we see some shift here. For instance, China becomes much more prominently present in ISO or IEC, as indeed written in the communication, and I quote from the communication, "Other world regions are taking the lead in international technical committees promoting their technological solutions, which are often incompatible with the EU's values, policies, and regulatory framework." End of quote. This will be a concern of the EU Excellence Hub on Standards and the High-Level Forum. In CEN and CENELEC, we are also giving due consideration to this challenge. The policy also refers to the need for a smooth uptake of research and innovation projects' outcomes into standardization. Mentioned in this context are the Booster Project and the Code of Practice. Through the Booster Project, the research and innovation community can receive support to participating in relevant standards activities, be they European level or global level. And the Code of Practice, currently, as far as I know, still available as a draft, describes various ways that research and innovation projects can link with standardization. A final aspect mentioned in the policy is the importance of education and training. The ambition is to motivate the research and innovation community to link with standardization by informing them on the role standards do play in bringing research and innovation outcomes to the market, and this way to renew the standardization experts base. And defense then you may ask? And that's on the next slide, where we see an extract. Next slide, Nicolaus. On this slide, we see an extract of the communication, where, so referring to the action plan on synergies between civil defense and space industry, the Commission will present a plan to promote the use of existing hybrid standards and take leadership in the development of new standards at the international level. So defense is touched upon also in this standardization strategy. Next slide then, where I come to the final part of this presentation. How does innovation impact on our work programs in CEN and CENELEC? And considering the time, I will not be able to present each slide in detail. And I will start with the box in yellow and then clockwise address also the contents of the other boxes. So next slide. A first observation is that CEN and CENELEC adhere to the principle to go for international standards first, unless there is a clear need for standards that covers a European specific need. We therefore often have a situation where, in addition to the International Technical Committee, there is also a dedicated technical committee at CEN-CENELEC level. The slide goes into the specific case of Joint Technical Committee 13 on cybersecurity and data protection, where Europe's GDPR regulation asks for some specific supporting standards for Europe. Next slide then. Where, of course, when we talk about European specific needs, an obvious source are the standardization requests that we receive from the Commission. The slide shows those standardization requests that were received last year during 2022. The one on the bottom refers to hydrogen supply for road, maritime transport and inland navigation, and is thus an example of technology that also is of importance for the defense sector. Next slide. Another source of standardization needs coming from innovation are the Commission's framework programs on research and innovation, where we see frequent references to standardization in the calls, sometimes even directly targeted at standardization. The one on the bottom addressing artificial intelligence, data and robotics will certainly also be relevant for the defense sector. And on the next slide, as the previous examples all did go back to 2021, I wanted to show some relevant CSAs for which the calls are out as we speak, and where CEN and CENELEC would be interested to join a consortium. And on the bottom, I should stress that in addition to coordination and support actions, CEN and CENELEC can participate as a consortium partner in research or innovation projects through the national standards bodies, who then take care of an early uptake of the project outcomes into standardization. The next slide, I show there another route through which innovation can come on our CEN-CENELEC table. Stakeholders indeed can make the initial contact with the national standards organization of their country. And the national standards body can then propose the creation of such new activity at European level, as shown here with the example of Hyperloop systems. And then on the next slide, next slide, I wanted to draw attention to the putting science into standards exercise that we do together with the Joint Research Center. And it's a collaboration that is explicitly mentioned in the Commission's standardization strategy communication of February 2022. Some extremely hot topics were addressed by these events, such as quantum technologies or artificial intelligence. And I wanted to show also that these events often were the start of a standardization activity in CEN-CENELEC. For artificial intelligence, both international and European committees already existed, but for quantum technologies, for instance, the Putting Science into Standards event was the start of the creation of a focus group in CEN-CENELEC, a focus group which was tasked to agree on a standardization roadmap. More recently, the focus group has been complemented by a technical committee. It's too early day, though, to enter into the details what the immediate next work items of this committee will be. So, last slide, next slide, summary. If you would ask me to summarize, I would say that the regulation 1025 recognizes Sensenelec and ETSIA's ESOs, making them eligible to produce harmonized standards in support of EU policy through standardization requests. I should also stress that we closely link with ISO and IEC, and that we have some track record in interfacing with the defense sector. Also should stress that SEN and Senelec and their national members participate in projects under the EU Research and Innovation Framework programs, through which innovations are feeding into the standardization process. And most importantly, our national members should be your first point of contact on standardization issues. And so, last slide, next slide. Thank you for listening. And you will see here my email address. So if there are further questions, you can always reach me at that address. Thank you for listening. End of the
Thank you very much, Mr. Van den Berg. Thank you. Great presentation. Actually, we have the comments that by Mr. Dr. Katarina Pastorli regarding your clear clarification regarding the conformity vs compliance, which is very important to understand the difference. And also we have also a note by Dr. Pastorli regarding the geopolitics of digital data standards and China's role. A report that we can find it. Thank you very much for your comment. And another one question that will be recording of this talk be available. Yes, as we mentioned on the start of the virtual event, the recording will be available through the DSA website. So please, all participants, you are welcome to review the comments by Mr. Pastorli, because they are not actually questions, but are statements. Very useful one. Thank you very much, Dr. Pastorli, about your statements. And what I would say, just to summarize what we said, Mr. Van den Berg. So all participants, with this incredible number of 190 participants up to now, most of them from the small, medium enterprises and from academia and from industry and actors, please, you are welcome. You are encouraged to communicate with our national SDO, with your national SB, to join the projects of Senelec. You've seen all these opportunities presented by Mr. Luc Van den Berg, even goes to science or even to the Horizon projects. You see a lot of Horizon projects regarding industry and standardization. So it's for the benefit. It's an investment from all SMEs and industry to participate through their SDO. For example, in Greece, a lot, in Italy, Uni, and so on, AFNOR, I will not mention all the European, through their SDOs, to be nominated to these projects and to join these clusters for their benefit, to increase their qualitative aspects and to increase their sustainability in the future, participating in research and development projects. So this is, I think, a resume, and also all these strategy opportunities, the European standardization strategy, which is active with tangible results already with this high-level forum and the SERPA working groups. And at the end, I think that you see the footprint of Senelec in defense all these years. Actually, the system that you will see later, EDSTAR, was based on the Senelec work. So thank you very much, Mr. Van den Berg. We hope that we will have flourishing results regarding this stakeholder forum on defense in the future. So we will have a stakeholder forum of defense and security for Senelec that will give an added value. And we hope so. Thank you very much for your comments. If I see any question, yes, we have the links, but or the statements of Dr. Pastorli. So please review the links. And also, we have a question by Mr. Podgoni. How CLC sees the cooperation in view of the NATO-EU joint declaration? Mr. Van den Berg, we have this question. How the CEN sees the cooperation in view of the EU-NATO declaration? Actually, the joint declaration actually mostly focused to EDT, that this organization, the Commission and NATO, should work closely on EDTs, and also that that the European Commission should ensure interoperability to NATO. These are included in the declaration, and this is a question by Mr. Podgornik. How do you see this declaration? What's your opinion, even an official one?
Well, an unofficial one is that, as was shown on the slide of yours, Nikolaos, we have 20 of our EU countries that are also within NATO. So we have, because of this overlap of membership also with Sensenelec, they will be in favor of ensuring that things are interoperable, so that we are not having divergences between what we would do at European level or what would happen on a more international level to also address NATO's needs. So we have all the agreements with NATO in which we are describing collaboration. These are not, they are still in place. They go back to 2005, and they can be, I would say, revived in order to ensure there is a closer collaboration.
Great, great. I think that there's an opportunity here for stronger. We know that Sensenelec participates in some of the NATO standardization staff group meetings that conducted, I don't know, 3 or 4 times per year. And also you have been invited to join some initiative by NATO on EDTs, especially on the international staff, and by the NSO, I think. Thank you very much for all the questions. And if it's not the case for a new question, now, thank you very much once again, Mr. Vandenberg. Thank you. Now you can see here the civil perspective and how this is very too close and so needed to bridge the two communities and to bring together and to strengthen interoperability. So that said, I will stop sharing the presentation of Mr. Vandenberg. Apologies for the massive information, but the time is restricted, so that's the reason we need to keep on track, stay on the schedule, and to receive the next presentation. The next presentation, actually, it's about the core topic of this virtual event, which are the legislation and the tools on standards in European defense and security procurements. So here, from the whole picture, we will go to a specific one about the defense standards in procurements and defense and security. And I will share my screen with you. First of all, just to make it okay. All right, this one. Just give me a second. All right, first of all right. So great. I think that you see all now the screen, the full screen about the European legislation. Great. So with the time now to stay on track and to stay on schedule, I have also the pleasure to brief you about the European legislation standards and tools for standards in defense and security procurements, but we will cover also in the securements in general. Let's go to the first picture, which is a general overview about the legislation of European Union in procurements. We have two specific two directives, one for public procurement, 2014-24 by European Commission, and the one that specifically addresses procurements in the fields of defense and sensitive security is a 2009-81 AC. These two directives are governing the procurements in public and defense and security. What you have to take into account that both directives are complied with the Commission Regulation number 213/2008 about the common procurement vocabulary. The CPV is the classification of equipment of material of all products and all that's classified by the European Union with regulation. What's the difference between the regulation and the directive? Regulation is mandatory, is applied instantly. One regulation applied as also applied as national legislation to all EU members. The directive is also mandatory, but needs to be also analyzed through a national law. So every state, every EU member state can develop its own law, transporting all the provisions of the directives. But the regulation is being applied instantly. So the common procurement vocabulary is mandatory for all European member states, and the directive should be also issued at national level by a national law transporting these directives. This is the difference between the regulation and the directive. So both directives, even in public procurements or in defense and security, they describe that the technical specifications shall be set out as part of the contract documentation. So it's very important. And the second, that the specifications shall afford equal access for tenderers and shall not have the effect of creating barriers and unjustified obstacles to the opening of the procurement of the competition. That's the reason you will see later that we are using alternative ways of, referring and defining technical specifications and standards. Also, both of these directives are available through the Eurolex system, and also the Commission regulation of common procurement vocabulary is also available in the Eurolex. What is very important, that when we are using NATO, as you can see later, in NATO we have a different codification system or classification system called a code, Allied Codification Publication is the NATO codification system, which needs also the countries that are using NATO standards, as you can see later, needs to have also the NATO codification system in the one hand and the CPV on the other, if they're also European and NATO members at the same time. So this is that you should take into account specifically the authorities, the procurement authorities, but also even the SMEs and industries, that we have the CPV, but also the classification for a NATO codification system, which is based to the United States federal codification system. So this is the first picture. Now we're going to deeper insights about the Article 18 of the Directive 81/2009, which this article actually provides the order of preference of selecting standards that should be referenced into technical specifications for contracts and defense and security procurements. And here, as you can see, that as a first proviso, that if we have an international standardization agreement that guarantees interoperability required by this agreement, and this paragraph is there for the NATO standardization agreements ratified by NATO allies. And of course, if these agreements are compatible with European law, the specifications shall be drawn up in this preference. First of all, we need to select national civil standards transposing European standards. And you have examples, DNN, SSEN from Swedish, or Norfras-SEN. Then technical approval, common technical specifications, national civil standards transporting international standards, where a DIN standard transporting an ISO standard, or a Swedish standard transporting an ISO or IEC standard, and then other international civil standards. If you can see in this order of priority, the last option is national defense standards and defense material specifications. So are not preferable because are not so broad and have broader applicability to all countries, first of all, as the civil standards. They have a broader applicability, a broader and also a technical excellence, and also accepted by the market around Europe. And that's the reason the priority is given to civil standards. So if you want to reference standards in your national, your procurements and contracts, please, first of all, you need to look for suitable best practice civil standards. How you can do that, we will explain it later. But it's very important that If we have a NATO standardization agreement ratified by allies in NATO, this is also a priority that should be included in procurement projects. And there's also a provision in this article. We will not explain all the article in full today, but we have courses by DSA and by European Defence Agency that provided for this reason, that every reference that be followed by the expression of equivalent. This equivalent brings the provision that should not bring barriers to the tenderers, to the SMEs to join the procurement. But equivalent, it's a very difficult sometimes option to translate. There are courses about the equivalent, and equivalent can go to standards, equivalent can go to conformity, and equivalent can go to accreditation. So it's not an easy thing to find equivalent. So if a producer can bring an equivalent, a technical folder recognized by a recognized body in European Union, then could be considered as equivalent to the specification. This is the bottom line meaning of equivalent. Here now, we have a European standard developed by Sensenelec years ago in 2012. This standard actually interprets the directive with regards to the priority order of standards, selecting standards for procurement. These standards is the EN 16341 and is a must-have for all stakeholders, even their procurement officers, procurement authorities, even their administration, even their industries, or even their SMEs, or all people engaged in the procurement, even a part of the tender or the part of of the delivery. This standard is a must-have. Why? Because it drives you the way and supports project management in the selection and use of applicable standards and standard-like documents. EN 16341. What the standard says actually is transferring about the order of priority described in Article 18 of the Commission directive. And if you can see here, first of all, we need to use standards that are harmonized or standards that are referenced in laws and regulation, as we mentioned before. And the second option, international military agreements, NATO STANAGs and publications, with a note that this should be used by a nation since the nation has the capacity and responded to NATO that I will ratify and implement the standard in full. This is the option, that if a nation has answered to NATO that I'm ratifying and I implement this standardization agreement fully, then it is, of course, goes without saying that it needs to incorporate this STANAG to the national procurements when they are going for a procurement. Because the STANAGs are also binding documents in terms of interoperability. And you see the results now in Ukraine and in NATO missions and operations. So every reference of these documents, as I mentioned, even the standards refers the equivalent. And also these standards recognize that the tool, where you have to go to select the best practice standards for procurement is the EDSTAR, the European Defence Standardization Reference System. The EDSTAR, as you heard before by Mr. Luc van den Berg, is the new generation of this work conducted by Sensenelec and by this BT, that Handbook for Defense Procurement. And the EDSTAR now is a new database that you will see later, and is also now owned by European Defence Agency. There are training sessions by European Defence Agency. The next one will be delivered in Cyprus, in Larnaca, next year, where the participants will have the opportunity to learn more about the EDSTAR. So that's a quick overview about the EDSTAR. The EDSTAR is a system that provides guidance for the selection and application of standards in defense material and to increase interoperability. The EDSTAR targets program managers, as we mentioned before, experts in government organization, as well in defense industry in support of procurements. And this EDSTAR now, as I mentioned, is owned by the EDA. This is the picture and this is the link for the EDSTAR. So it's open. in worldwide, so everyone has access to EDSTAR and to the standards reference in this system. The EDSTAR provides, they have two categories of services. The one provides technical reports and recommendation. What are the standards, these best practice standards have been used, the results of these standards, and why they are considered best practices. So actually they have technical reports of the implementation of the standards, which drive into conclusion that these standards are considered best practices, which is very good. There are reports that these standards were tested by authorities. So these standards now already we have an implementation report that are considered best practice. The search service is EDSTAR is being used as a search engine for best practice standards, where you can search by reference, by technical domain, standardization body, and keywords. And let me go one step further about this. Here are the technical domains of EDSTAR. On your, you can see on the screen, or your left hand, you will see the technical domain, 29 technical domains, including CBRN, energetic materials, fuels and lubricants, batteries, packaging, and so on. This is a picture of the domains that you, if you are interested or you are engaged as an SME, industry, or if you are a defense authority procurement agency, and you want to search for standards for your procurement projects, this is a database that can assist you to look for best practice standards, to select for your project, for your mission. Also on the right hand, you are seeing the dotted lines, some additional areas. These areas are in the future of EDSTAR. In the future, the capabilities-driven approach, the capabilities priorities by the European Commission and the European Defense Agency will be integrated as pillars in this database. So in the future, we'll have also standards under these capabilities you are seeing on the right hand of the screen, the right part of the screen. This is about EDSTAR. Just to have a picture now, why we are talking about civil standard. This is a picture. EDSTAR actually includes the 2/3 of civil standards and just 1/3 of military ones. And this is how you can see in practice that the priority of civil standard exists here. And as you can see from the pie, the biggest, the Lion King is Sensenelec in this area, but also we have international standards, ISO, IC, NATO standards, because as you heard before by Mr. McCloskey, and we need to have a harmonized effort on NATO standards and European standards going towards a common goal. But we have also standards by the German agency of standardization, and also the Equipment Agency of Germany, and also by UK DSTAN. We have also, and also US DoD standards there. So we have a plethora of standards. All these standards are documented and supported by technical reports about their added value and why they are considered best practice. Of course, this is a living effort. This is a dynamic effort. Always, this database should be updated, should be kept relevant, and should be always refreshed with all the new trends and all the, the reliability standards that ensure us about also how we can invest in a safely manner, if we are industry or even we're government. So this is the picture of EDSTAR. And as we're talking about NATO, let's see now the picture of if you are a procurement agency or if you are an SME or an industry and you want to join and to see, okay, I want to see these standards, because even in the EDSTAR, all the standards are not downloadable. It's just a bibliographic data. So if you want to download the standards, if they are civil standards, you should go through your SDO, through your national standard developing organization, and then to request to have this package of standards. It's very important for your portfolio to have all the standards required. For NATO, this is an unclassified, non-classified version of the NATO standard documents database, NSDD. This is the link that you can see on the title. You can click on the link. You can go visit the NATO website. It's a non-classified, it's a public website. So you can see there the bibliographic data of all promulgated NATO standards. If you can see here, a locker means that this standard is classified, so it's not available, you cannot download. But there is also a case of standards that you can download. They bring no classification marking, so you can have access. How you can have access to these standards? Through your national MOD. You need to knock the door of the MOD standardization office and request access for your projects, for your product design, for your production phase. If you need to have NATO standards, SMEs, industries, communicate with your national MOD standardization office, and they have the obligation, they have the task to facilitate your efforts to participate in and engage with standards. So this is about how you are finding the best practice standards, even from EDSTAR or from NATO. In both circumstances, even in ADA or in NATO, you can apply with security clearance to participate through the MOD as a national expert to working groups developing these standards. So please, if you are an SME or do not hesitate to contact your MOD in order to be registered as a national representative to EDA committees or to NATO committees. It's for your benefit. It's for the benefit of all of us. It's for the benefit of your sustainability in the future. And now a summary, as you see that the 2009-81 European Commission legislation is a driving legislation for defense security, and provision for referring standards and technical specifications are offered in Article 18. The definitions provided in this directive, because they are providing definition about standards that are not exactly the same with the standard definitions of the ISO guide, but they are produced and they're offered there only for the purpose of this directive. The EN 16341 is the guiding document. It's a must-have to your library, even you are an authority, a procurement authority, or even you are an SME or industry. The EDSTAR is the tool, is a database you should look for best practice standards and then to NATO. So EDSTAR is complementary to the NATO standard. Both of these tools, of these engines, are your tool facilitating your efforts to select your best practice standards for your procurement projects. And of course, the EDSTAR, as the NATO standardization document database, targets also the managers, program managers in governmental organizations in order to engage with procurement systems. That concludes my presentation. And let's see now some questions about we had in this period. Thank you for your attention. Companies from outside the EU collaborate. They have the same standard. From outside the EU zone collaborate to have the same. Of course, you can join your national SDO activities. You can join your, and through your national SDO, you can go through the joint committees of ISO with Sensenelec. There is a Vienna document agreement between ISO and Sensenelec. So you can join forces to have joint standards with the European Union, with Sensenelec. Also, other comments, we have, I have an old Turkish colleague, Mehmet, good morning, Günaydın. Also, we have a comment by Mr. Otterbach, that having in mind that for producing standards, the experts are the crucial contributors, and hearing, I'm sorry, and hearing that we need to have the EDSTAR areas. May be interesting to know exactly today ongoing areas EDSTAR and how they plan the new areas. So actually, there's a comment by Mr. Otterbach that all participants they should have an update about the EDSTAR and the new areas of EDSTAR. Yes, this is the case, but not for this virtual event. This training will be provided by EDA. Was invited today. Unfortunately, they had another one meeting and another one obligation. But this training in the future will be provided by the EDA about the updates on the EDSTAR. And this is the organization that has the remit to give more information about this system. Thank you very much. And also we have a comment by my Dr. Pastorli about the new Interoperable Act. Is expected to deliver more efficient public services through improved cooperation in IT solution. Do you consider that are right condition to join efforts among Interoperable Europe, NATO standards, and NetStar? Absolutely, absolutely, Dr. Pastorli. ICT standardization is one of the pillars, fundamental pillars of standardization, the same in NATO. That's the reason that we have a workshop in Athens next month, 7 to 9 of February, where we have standards in emerging and disruptive technologies and innovation, where the head of the DG2 Department of DIGIT, which actually the custodian of the Interoperable Act, will be there to join forces with NATO. And EDA will be there as well. So absolutely a great question. Already actions have been taken to bring all these communities in the same table, because ICT standardization is critical, even for NATO or even for EU. Great question. Thank you very much. So I don't see any other comments. In bottom line, with regards to standards in defense procurement, there is a course on this. DSA provides a course, and also EDA provides insights for EdStar. So since you are interested, you can communicate with us. We are delivering today's course on this, more details of what you've seen in details, but also EDA provides a specific course on European defense standard EdStar. As I mentioned, next year will be this year in October will be delivered in Larnaca, Cyprus. So please contact EDA. We will send you later all the details for this course. So we don't have any other question. Are there any remarks by the panelists? Are there any comments? I've had about another one question. When the next meeting, the next workshop will be held, it will be held in Athens, the NATO one, 7th to 9th of February. Please visit the Hellenic National Defense General Staff website for more information. I will send you the link later. If it's not the case, thank you very much for your interest and your questions. I hope that we managed to answer all of them. Also, we have a question for training courses to support NATO standards. They must be available in English and French. The panel's opinion could be appreciated. Absolutely, the training for NATO standards provided by NATO, but also by DSA or by e-learning. These are only for the moment are offered in English. There are French courses in NATO delivered only by the office, the CND, Centre de Normalisation de Défense in DSA in Paris, at UA. This is the only office providing NATO training in the French language. All the other courses are available for the broad public by NATO or by DSA or by individual countries are provided only in English language. And even the e-learning in NATO, the available learning through the ACT platform is available only in English for the time being. But also this tool in the ACT platform now is also available in French. So yes, there's another one tool by the Aligned Command Transformation platform, e-learning, which is also for NATO standardization, as is offered also in French language. All right, so I don't see, okay, we've got the link for the NATO use of civil standards workshop by Dr. Pastorli. She's also a lecturer in this innovation, in this panel. Thank you, Doctor. So we don't have any other questions. So if you want to see the link for the civil standards workshop, please check the link provided by Dr. Pastorli. So that concludes my presentation. And now we will go to the real world. To industry. So let's see now how the industry perspective. Okay, that's the theory, that's the rules, that's the regulations, that's the legislation. But what is going on in industry? How industry, what is their perspective in developing standards according to the life cycle of a product, which is very important, and what efforts need to be done for harmonizing, industrial work in this area. And that said, I will stop sharing my screen and I will give the floor to Mr. Claudio Buccini. I already had a quick introduction about Mr. Buccini, and now he is a vice chair of the ASD Europe coordination committee regarding the life cycle of all projects of products in the ASD. But I will not the expert, so I will give the floor to you, Claudio, to provide your presentation, and please also to tell more about you and about your activities. Thank you very much. It's an honor for having you here. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Nico. Can you give me the screen, please? Can I share the screen? Just so a small
yes, yeah, absolutely, yes. Great.
Yeah.
And now, yes,
and
you have it.
correction. I'm not vice chair. In this moment, I'm interim chairman of the Services Commission. Okay, because somebody
all right.
the new chairman. Okay, doesn't matter.
Apologies.
No, it doesn't matter. Absolutely. So I'm trying. Okay, here it is. Can you see it? Can you see this my screen?
Yes, I can see the full screen. I don't know if Howard. Great.
Okay, I see. Yeah. So the European Commission and Europe has three pillars. This is one of them: the EU standardization policy. The second pillar is the single market. Okay, you know what it means, so I don't waste time for talking about this. The third pillar is Industry 4.0. I don't like to call it Industry 4.0. Follow the arrow, please. I call it Industry and Services 4.0. And I want to give you the definition, an easy definition of what services it is. Services is everything is needed in order to assure that the system or the product will work as it is wanted, as it is needed, in the place where it was conceived, and at the cost of the final user. Okay, this means that you have to start talking about services right on the concept phases of the system and product. Okay, this is a full engineering. It's not. You know that the NATO now is calling IPS, Integrated Product Support. The old acronym was ILS, Integrated Logistics Support. When you ask to a CEO what is logistics, they will call you transportation, warehousing, and distribution. This is no more the case. Okay, so when you talk about services, so this is why I'm saying that Services 4.0 is as important as Industry 4.0. Okay, this is a third pillar of Europe. You can see also that in this document, the focus is also on the need for having the availability of skilled workers, which means the users of standards. We are talking about standardization, you see here, and we are talking about availability of appropriately skilled workers. I go on. My question is, are these three pillars of European Commission also three starting points for European defense applications? We are talking about that. Okay, yes, for me it is clear that if the EU defense industry wants to achieve a single market, industry and services 4.0 and standardization, some perspective must be established. This is the title of this presentation. Look at this very beautiful drawing. European Industry and Services 4.0 standardization entity supporting the digital transformation. This has been made by Alliance for Internet of Things Innovation. So I think we should be here, manufacturing, industry, automation, something. Now, two questions. Where are the EU standardization policy, the single market strategy, and industry services 4.0 inside this picture? Oh, I don't know. Nobody knows. And how can we, Europeans, manage these issues for our defense industry? These are questions. Now, who are the stakeholders of the defense space of our environment here? There are defense and space industries. There are national MODs. There is European Community DG DEFIS, which is responsible for EU policy and defense industry and aerospace. Okay, and EDA, which has to support the member states and the council in their effort to improve European defense capabilities, etc., etc. As I thank Nico for what he said before, EDA manages EDSTAR, The European Defense Standards Reference System containing references to best practice standards and standard act specification. Other entities in Europe, OCCA, l'Organisation Conjointe de Coopération en matière d'armement, the Organization for Joint Armament Cooperation. It is 6 nations, in some cases also 8 nations, or Europe, which are managing altogether a lot of euros for doing programs for defense procurement. The NATO, of course, is active in Europe, we all know that. And ASDSTAN, there is only one standardization organization which is fully devoted to aerospace and also defense, okay? It cooperates with EDA for AD-STAR, okay, on the application of civil standards for military purposes. I think that Paria Lieva will tell us much better than me what ASD-STAR is. Now, let's look at this example. This is a hypothetical example, okay? Please follow my arrow, okay? Say that in Europe, someone, ADG, decides for space, for example, to put a lot of money for a manned vehicle for Mars and, in the same time, a manned vehicle for Moon. Say that the leader is a German company, but also the participants are France and Italy. And for the Moon, the manned vehicle has the leader with the French company, and with Spain and Italy participating to that project. This is reality today, okay? It's clear for you, and it's clear for me, of course. The German company selects the standard for cabin air. There is a man on board, which comes from ANSI. ANSI is the American Standardization Institute, okay? He can do it, yes, he can do it. And say that the French company selects a standard for cabin air, which comes from ECHEN, CEN, okay? European norm and standard. What happens? That 2 cabin air standards have to be studied, tested, certified, and used by hundreds, many hundreds of resources, with this final result. In Germany, all companies, committed others, will know and will be able to use the ANSI standard. Here it is. So we shall go to Mars. Europe will go to Mars using ANSI standard. In France, everybody has to know 2 standards, the ANSI and the CEN. In Italy, everybody will have to know ANSI and CEN standards. In Spain, they will know only the European standard. Here it is. Now, question is this. All resources, not question, this is the point. All resources have to learn many and different standards. This is one example, but the example exists. I shall go further than this. Both European and not. This is absolutely not standardization policy for Europe. This is not single market strategy, and this is not industry and services 4.0. I go further. This is an OCCA program, the first one. The MALE RPAS, Medium Altitude Long Endurance Remotely Piloted Aircraft System. This is a real program which is going on in progress today. It is a program with 4 participating states, which are France, Germany, Italy, and Spain. This is a picture for the final solution. You know that in Europe, and as a NATO program, exists the Alliance Ground Surveillance, which is, well, no big difference, you see. This is a turbojet, this is a turboprop, but it is a MALE RPS, okay? Now, question is the previous conclusion still valid? Why can I say this? Because for Alliance Ground Surveillance, 15 states are participating to this. Also, Germany and Italy, which are doing the European MALE. So Europe here is completely divided because it seems that 2 nations knows and are able to use the standards which have been used for the AGS, partially, not completely, but this is the case, and also to the European one. the OCA. We are spending money for doing this, and we spent money for doing this, but the standards which are used here are not known, not considered, okay, by Denmark, Estonia, Slovakia, Romania, Poland, etc., etc. This is not a EU standardization policy. This is not single market strategy. This is not industry and services 4.0. Let's look at this terrible example. This is terrible, really terrible. Available standard for calculating the MTBF, the median time between failures. Okay, so the availability, how long it will last. Okay, how long it will work in the field of operations. Okay, there is a plenty of standards around the world. Okay, let's consider two examples: a joystick board and a tracking ball board. If you make the calculation with the very old 217 standard for MTBF, you get these two results: 60,000 and 158,000 hours of operations. If you make the calculation of exactly the same boards, okay, with the modified with ANSI Vita 51.1 217, you will get these values, which is the same values as before, but multiplied by 22 and multiplied by 23. And if you make the calculation with the FIDES guide, 2009, now is going to be a new one, okay? But if you make the calculation, you multiply this value with 132 and with 94. So it is clear that the standardization word, and here we have ASD stand and Sensenelec, in my view, in some way responsible for this big mess. It is not possible that in the world of today, three standards, which are valid, considered as valid and usable, all of them for contractual purposes, for procurement purposes, can give results so much different each other. It is not possible. NATO has decided to set up a study group 281. I am the chairman of that group, which is studying this item here, this very big mess, which is the calculation of MTBF. NATO is doing a job about that. Okay. By the way, I say again, sorry for saying this. I don't know what is happening. Is that okay? Can you see the screen? Yeah. So I say again to Parialieva and to Mr. Vandenberg, well, I think something has to be made, because it is not possible that all the standards exist around the world for calculating MTBF and they can give results so much different. I don't know how. It's on you. Okay. Now, who is doing standards in Europe? These are the European Standards Organization, Sensenelec and DSA. Okay. And there is also, as far as defense procurement and defense sector is considered, ASD stand, which is an associated body to stand for aerospace standards, cooperate with the ADA on the application of civil standards for military purposes. Now, it is clear that Sensenelec national members are the national standardization body, 27 European standardization bodies, and total 34 countries, all the European ones. At sea, these statements are coming from the internet page of this organization. Counts more than 900 member organizations worldwide, over 60 countries and 5 continents. I am happy, absolutely happy about this. Now, we are talking here today about European defense standardization. Okay. ASD stand is made by this organization here, with a total of 6 nations, 2 European entities, 1 and 2, and 1 European industry, which is this one. Well, now, can I say, which seems to be more agile as far as defense sector is concerned? Okay, I don't give any answer, but the answer is easy to say. Now, Europe, this is our beautiful Europe, okay? And these are the European languages. Look at this picture here, it's astonishing. I don't know. The first one, this one, what is it? I don't know. I don't know. This is Greece, that's clear. This is Italiano, the most beautiful language in the world. This is Slovakia. Nobody understands. So it's very difficult to understand. It's difficult to manage Europe, no problem. Okay, but no problem. The above, this one, represent the need to find a single, adequate, and higher harmonization process aimed to improve the ease of understanding among all human resources of aerospace and defense European industries. That is clear, because if we move this way, Europe will very in the very long future, far future, be able to achieve interoperability and what we want to achieve. So, can we define an EU common standards as the set of technical standards to be shared among all human resources, take care, all human resources, in order to define for an European project and for all future European projects, all features to be agreed during the whole product system life cycle, which goes from concept to assessment or acquisition, development or design, manufacturing, service, and disposal. Okay, let's define this. So the meaning is, if a number of European companies and organizations and nations wants to have interoperability, at which level of human resources the standards have to be understood and used? Well, at all levels, that is clear. Because if you don't start with a concept, okay, of that system product by using the same standard, which is known by everybody, you will not achieve those results. And if you don't use the same standards, not only during industry, but in industry 4.0 and services 4.0, if you're not using the same standard that have to be known not only by the standards makers, they have to be known by the users of the standards. Okay, you will not achieve the three pillars. Now, IMSD, Services Commission, clearly for me, the main industrial stakeholders for Europe, for aerospace and defense sector, is ASD, that is clear, because it represents 19 direct company members. The CEOs and their Sherpas are directly participating to the board of ASD, and these are the 19 companies which are participating to the board directly. Plus, there are 22 European national SD associations in 17 nations. So, SD surely is the industrial stakeholder for European defense sector. SD has the Services Commission for Integrated Product Support. The Services Commission has three working groups: the PSSG, Product Support Specification Group, the SSG, the Strategic Standards Group, and CSSTOG, okay, which is for Customer Support Training and Operational Services. Okay. The PSSG is developing worldwide renowned product support specifications, the S-Series, S1000D, etc., etc. They are worldwide used, collaboratively managed by industrial experts, both European and US, updated and tuned all together each 2 years, okay? And they are included in EDISTAR. SSG aims to support effective governance of development and validation of interoperability standards and solutions. CSDOC identifies, develops, selects, and recommends areas for increased cooperation across support, training, and operational services. Let's give a look to this. This speech is not complicated, okay? Please follow my arrow. This is simplified technical English, 100 that means something. Simplified technical English was started in 1984 in order to allow the technical writers not to make misunderstandings or mishaps, okay? So this is the first one. S1000D, where is it? Here it is. It is the way how the technical publication should be written. S2000M, D is for documents. M is for material management. This is how the material management should be used. S3000L, logistics support analysis activities. S4000P, prevented and scheduled maintenance analysis activities. S5000F, operational and maintenance data feedback. F is for field returns. X6000S, here it is, provisioning and training of people. S6000I, guide for the use. S600 are data exchange modules. I make you an example. If you write here the configuration, one configuration item, you want to define all the features of that configuration item, you should use a maximum of 70, nearly 70 numbers, okay? The weight, the height, the color, the life in the stocks or something like this, okay? 68, 65, if I'm not wrong. Well, if you want to make a logistics support analysis for that item, you need only, say, 35 items. But if you need to manage the material, including in that part, you need only 20. The data exchange modules digitally are doing this. Can you imagine what simplification, how simple is becoming the management of infos among all of this design of system and support equipment, which is the real beginning, and to the in-service use activities which have to be made by all the companies and operators and users involved. Take into consideration that the word user can get very different meaning during the life cycle of a product. At the beginning is the strategic thinkers, okay, of the MODs. Secondarily, they go to the procurement. After they go to, so the procurement is the user of the standards, some standards. And at the end, you arrive to the final user, the soldier of the field, or the pilot of the aircraft, or the captain of the ship. They are the final users of the standards we are considering. Now, who is using today the S-Series specification? These are the programs. These are the product types, the military or civilian, country, and company. This is the use today of S1000D. S2000M is the NATO supply agency standard management of material. Okay. S3000L, S4000P. You can see there is another page here, this one, okay? You see, it is coming. 5000T and 6000, 5000F and 6000T are not yet arrived. Why this? I tell you this, okay? This is the life cycle of a product, of a system. It comes from concept, continues with assessment or acquisition, goes with demonstration or design, goes with manufacturing, goes in services, and ends up with the disposal. How and when to use the S-Series specification? Here it is. Write everything in simplified technical English. Write all the technical documents with S1000D. If you start up the beginning of the life cycle of a product with these two specifications, you will be able to use, as I said before, tuned all together each year and digitally connected each other in the best possible way. This is also why 5000F and 6000T are not yet used, because many systems have not yet arrived to manufacturing, for example, or they started to be manufactured years ago, so they were not already in progress. Now, look at this. NATO guidance, NATO LP10 Allied Logistic Program. Number 10, issued on 23rd October 2017, is the Allied Logistic publication for NATO guidance on integrated logistic support 2017. Okay, we shall ask for a review of this title. It should be integrated product support for multinational armament programs. This is a statement which is included in a letter. Okay, it is an unclassified letter, but it is better not to be too much open. But look at this. NATO's Life Cycle Management Group, the AC327, is revising NATO's guidance for integrated life cycle support, ALP10, and establishing a strategy for NATO, its members, and industries, both defense and non-defense. Nations included in the Life Cycle Management Group, all of them, decided to base the revised guidance on ASD, AIA, as series of specification, the ones that we have seen right now. Next, of course, to other specification and standards to ensure an open, available, and integrated guidance covering the important part of integrated logistics support. The aim is to release the revised LP10 as a NATO standard by mid-end 2023, this year. So this year, the S series will be the base of NATO ALP10. My conclusions. European defense is a community of many nations, languages, and entities organizations. Reliability, availability, maintainability, safety, and interoperability are paramount for defense. Only standards can assure RAMS I when different nation languages must operate on the same mission and field. European defense activities need to have a standardization entity for fulfilling the requirements of EU defense industry stakeholder. It should be like ASD standard. I want to say ASD standard. Also, if ASD has already clearly declared that ASD standard is the organization. ASD is the European Aerospace and Defense Industry stakeholder, and it provides specifications that are used for many defense programs. NATO will use extensively the SDS serial. Hence, if a real industry perspective on a European standard for defense application is expected, the first step should consider the extensive adoption of the S series on all future European defense programs. In this context, adoption also means a strong focus on the training needed to ensure a real RAMS-I capability. ASD is carrying out the UCOS initiative. Pari knows it already. Many people in Europe knows it. It is an initiative aimed at guaranteeing to all EU human resources involved, from the concept to disposal of a system product, a same for all training on standards. I think that I shall propose, no, not I'm sure, I shall propose to SD to organize an event like this, aimed to give to the world a real understanding of the UCOS initiative. Thanks for your attention.
Wow. Wow, Claudio. Wow, what a great presentation. Thank you very much. Too many insights in a very complex environment. It's really worth listening, all this with his vast experience. And thank you very much. It was really an added value to this event, but also to all our colleagues participating. I think the number remains, very high, and we have a lot of people from SMEs and industry. If I would make, to have the honor to make a recap about, of course, you gave the complete picture about, and also your strong recommendations were clear, sound and clear, actually. I would say that probably in the future, the challenge for in the European level, the Commission, in this high-level forum, to have also ASD or ASD standard represented there, because a lot of associations around Europe, around SMEs in Europe are represented, definitely is needed to have also this defense part, which is necessary in airspace, which is really necessary in order to bring, as a connecting glue with all the connecting blocks in Europe. So it's very important, first of all, to have this association strong connected ASD with the Commission bodies, a European Defence Agency, a single body. The second also challenge should be all the SMEs or associations are not actively yet engaged in ASD. Europe should closely engage and get in touch with you, not personally, but the committees in ASD Europe, in order to learn more about the EU course, about to train their people about your initiative, to train their people on a common mindset, on harmonized set of standards, so they can improve their quality, their sustainability, and to join, how do you say, to join these great initiative. So I consider that, and also training is very important. So I think that there's a challenge for ASD and ASD to go closer to this high-level forum, or to the Commission and European entity. On the other hand, the SMEs and industries in Europe, they need to come closer if they haven't done so far with you, with ASD Europe and your initiatives, in order to have a common voice, a common mindset and understanding. So really, congratulations. I mean, this also happens to NATO with the LP, also with the life cycle management group and the life cycle support publications there, life cycle cost and support. Absolutely agree. It needs, and thank you very much for mentioning also the NATO effort to bridge this community, this effort, and to harmonize. So that's my my message. Now I see a lot of questions, of course. Let's see if we have time now to answer the question. Or yes, if we have, why is this area not proposed a topic for EdStar to reflect the status as best practice standard for this area? So you can have in a topic in EdStar that the ASD standards could include it there. One question by Stefan Otterbach. Another one question.
If I can answer, Nico,
yes, of course.
EDA has already been contacted by me last year for EUCOS initiative. And I am absolutely in favor of using EDStar as the European archive, only European archive of defense standards and standards like documents. I am absolutely in favor of those things here. Okay.
All right, all right. So it was another one also by Mr. Simon Podgorny-Likai to make this proposal as a project standardization management proposal in EdStar. So it's will close the same. We have one question by Mr. Tristan Valdemaras. How do you see that can we standardize a serious implementation? I'm sorry, just I missed the question. Yes, a serious implementation and compatibility with information management systems. ERPs, EMs, etc. Aiming for interoperability at data information level so weapon system can be managed seamlessly. So this is the question.
The question is very clear, and the answer is also very clear. The company that provides to my expenses, ISEL Nord, you can go there, ISEL Nord, it is on the title of my slide, already provides, but not only that one, many others provide platforms, digital platforms, where the S-Series is fully managed for a system or product. So it is already there, okay? There is no need at all to invent something else. Absolutely nothing. Great.
We have also another one question by noticed by Mr. Cambrai. He was of course in the EDA, one of the pillars in the EDA effort in EdStar before, and says that in EdStar the group 13 already refers to ASD series. Perhaps is a lot of communication, or there's also I don't know if it's an active group in EdStar, but also refers to ASDS series there. This is the notice by Mr. Cambrai. And the other one is about a long question by Dr. Pusterli that does any agreement, it was an agreement between Senelec, ANSI, and ETSI, so US-EU meetings took place in Paris, and principal cooperation and action affirms the value of increased mutual understanding of transatlantic cooperation and global issues. Published guiding documents to clarify US and European standard systems in order to enhance understanding. Does any other agreement took place during 2022 into account the current geopolitical health and energy and other crises? actually is not actually here in the segment, Dr. Pustorli. This question will be deferred to Mr. Van den Berg and will be answered in a later stage, all right? If there is another agreement or another between international and European SOs regarding common acts or common actions. So that is more or less the questions. We just to stay on schedule. Thank you very much. Because you see, you opened the Pandora's box. I'm joking, but you raised the interest with a lot of questions. Thank you very much. We'll try to prioritize a little bit and to stay on track. So all the other questions will be recorded by the system and will be answered by email. So we'll try to meet all your requirements and all your questions. Thank you very much for your understanding, but we need to stay on track and schedule. An excellent presentation. All these presentations will be shared through the DSA website. So you will receive even the recording, but also the presentation material. Thank you once again, Claudio. And now we have the floor. Thank you. You have the floor for Ms. Maria Lieva for having as a sequence of actions now these distant activities and how they're engaged even in civil, but also in the defense domain, which is very current for our virtual event today. So, Pari, the floor is yours. You can share your material. Great.
Hello, do you see my screen?
Yes, I see. We can see your screen, but not the full slide.
Yeah, I'm doing the full screen now.
All right.
Just it's not showing. Okay, now it's here. So thanks, Nicholas, for inviting for this nice event, virtual event. I think the sequence of the presentations were so well established that people already aware about the European standardization system, the strategy, and it will be like a logical continuation of the presentations done before. So I will start explaining a bit what's ASD activities, and I don't want to be too theoretical, so I wanted also to bring some practical examples of the standards in use in the defense area. So the first about the ASD, it's an industrial non-profit association. We are an association which is established under the ASD. So in the past, we were one single association, but then due to some reasons, it was separated, but we are still very connected to ASD. And we developed and maintain European standards on behalf of European aerospace and defense industry. So as an associated body to CEN, we are at CEN there are 400 technical committees, and we're the only associated body to CEN, which is acting as a technical committee to CEN for the aerospace standards, but also being an independent organization from CEN. And we are the main provider of the European aerospace standards, EN standards in Europe. We have a special cooperation agreement with CEN. This agreement is dated to 1986, and it was established in order to enhance the competitiveness of the European companies, because the standardization process in Europe is quite long as perceived by the industry, and this cooperation agreement between ASD and CEN allows to provide a quick standard for the industry, which is named ASD PREN. And through this special process, which established with CEN, this ASD PRENs are further transformed into the final EN, and the technical content is completely identical. So we have different templates, layouts, let's say like this, but the technical content remains the same. And the values, our values are openness, transparency, consensus, and balance. And this is the values we share in all our working groups. We bring the industry experts from all over Europe together, and the safety of our standards are guaranteed by the OEMs, original equipment manufacturers, and type certificate holders who chair our working groups. Then just some general information about us. As I mentioned, that the cooperation with CEN is dated back to 1986, and even before, if we go into the archives. So we are the technical committee acting at CEN level for aerospace. Up to date, we have published 2,590 European standards, and this is a 16% of total CEN portfolio of EN standards. So current work program is 272 ENs, ASD PRENs, which are in progress to be published, the EN standards. Then we have around 300 direct experts organized in 45 working groups and 10 domains of activities. In ASDSTAN, around 70 technical reports published by us, and the yearly production of standards is between 40 to 60 ASDSTAN PRNs and around 80 European standards. So our deliverables are mostly concentrated on the ASDSTAN PRNs, which are further transformed to the EN, and the technical reports, which we call TRs. So here you can see the 10 domains of activities. Later on, the presentations will be shared, so you can go to the table of the technical organization. You can see that we are organizing on the domain level, and then at each domain we have several working groups. So the description of working groups are provided in the website, so you can get more information. Just to explain a bit the role, so main domains of ASDSTAN activities are concentrated on electrical, mechanical, and material components and parts for the aerospace. Additionally, what we do, we develop standards related to the design, production, and maintenance of aircraft systems, equipment, and standards parts. We work in close cooperation with national standardization bodies, because this is a principle in the SEN environment. You have to work on the national delegation principle, and that's why we are heavily supported by the colleagues from NSBs. We call them NSBs, national standardization bodies from France, Germany, and the UK. In France, the aerospace activities are delegated to BNE, but we also cooperate with AFNOR. In Germany, it's TIN, and in the UK, it's BSI. We also contribute to the promotion of European standards at international level. We can also, through the Vienna Agreement, which has established between Sentinelec and ISO, we can cooperate and basically push the standards developed at the ASDSTAN level to ISO level. We cooperate with EDA. Sorry, we are part of the EDA Joint Maintenance Committee at STAR on the application of civil standards for military purposes. I will give a bit of more details about this in the next slides. Then we used to have the technical cooperation agreement with NATO for the STANAG 4626. I would like to give a bit more information about the STANAG. It's a set of open architecture standards for avionics architecture, particularly in the field of integrated modular avionics. So this is the purpose of the standard is to establish the uniform requirements for the architecture for integrated modular avionics systems, as defined by the ASAC program. And this this technical cooperation agreement is built between ASDSTAN and NATO. This is the cooperation agreement is implemented under ASDSTAN DO2 Working Group 12, which is the Open Avionics Architecture Working Group. So this is the main area of this working group is to support and maintain the EN 4660 series, which are based on the NATO STANAG 4626. And we are also acting as the European body for the development of global quality aerospace standards by the IAQG. This is an international aerospace quality group. So this is a group which develops the quality standards all over the world, and then published by 3 sectors in Europe, Asian Pacific region, and in America by SAE. In Europe, it's published by ASDSTAN. ASDSTAN accepts the World Trade, the World Trade Technical Barriers of Trade, good practices, Code of Good Practices, and is listed as a standardizing body inside of the at ISO level, so under the EU. So you can see, if you go to the ISO website, you can see that at ISO there is a list of standardizing bodies, and ASDSTAN is represented here under the EU. Those are the list of our members. In the previous presentation, you have already received some information about this. So main members are trade association, national trade associations from Europe. In France, it's GFAS. In Germany, we are represented by by the National Standardization Body, German National Standardization Body. In the UK, it's ADS, which is a UK trade association for aerospace and defense. TIDAI in Spain, EASA, which is a European agency, European Aviation Safety Agency. AIAD, it's Italian association. SOF is a Swedish association. ASD, it's a European trade association representing aerospace and defense and security industries in Europe, and the company member Airbus. So mainly all the SMEs which are members of those associations in Europe join ASD working groups through the membership by these organizations. The more information about how you can join or to be involved in the standardization activity at ASD level or through the SEN member country can be found in our website as well. Additionally, there's some listed benefits for the European aerospace industries. The standardization is seen as a strategic topic for the European aerospace industry. It helps to reduce the cost, along the supply chain and avoid the trade barriers. The increased harmonization in aerospace standard development activities enhances European interoperability and reduces production and acquisition time and costs. Those are the identified added values to the ASD community by being the members at ASD. So they gain influence in the standardization activities with direct participation, with direct access to the standardization bodies like working groups on critical domains like electrical, mechanical parts, system engineering, reach compatible standards and digital standards. The members can suggest, any member from the industry can suggest a new standardization work proposal on the topic of the interest, and then this is subject to the ASD members to approve or reject the work proposal, new work proposal. And this gives the membership at ASD gives an access to the ASD network of experts from the aerospace industry. Those are added values for the defense area. ASD is the main European SDO to develop the European standards for the aerospace sector, as well as the SEN aerospace technical body for cross-domain standardization work. We bring the stakeholders together from the industry, regulators, and NSBs to jointly develop the best standards for the aerospace sector. We provide the possibilities for the MODs and European agencies to influence the development of ASD standards and include the defense requirements in future EN standards. ASD continues standardization work for the Eurofighter program. This is a long-lasting program, and we still contribute to this program through our standards. We also contribute to the future work on the next generation fighter programs, FCAS. So the policy in the FCAS is, for the moment, still first demonstration stage. I think it's until 2027, and then the policy is now for now to use the available standards in the market for the demonstrator phase, and then after the 2027, the new standards will be needed, and the plan is to go for the EN standards. The European manufacturers using the European standards would not be subject to ITAR regulation if they follow the EN standards, which are the public standards accepted in Europe by 34 nations represented in CEN, countries represented in CEN. Those are the standards developed by ASD and applied in the defense sector as well. So you have heard a lot about the EDSTAR today. This is a European Defense Standards Reference System. And in EDSTAR, there are around 500 standards which are originating from ASD. They are listed as an EN, and as I explained in the beginning, the standards are developed first at ASD level and then transferred to CEN to become the EN standard and adopted in 34 countries. Those 500 standards have dual use, so they are mainly developed for the civil aviation, civil aircraft, but can be used in the military aircraft as well. So the main domains of activities where those standards are coming are mechanical standards, those are the standards for the bolts, nuts, fluidic fittings, bearings, and those are used in the military aircrafts like Tornado, Mirage, Eurofighter, Rafale, Gripen. And the electrical domain standards, which are mainly for the circuit breakers, cables, connectors, used in the civil aircraft like A380, A350, and also for the military aircraft like A400M. Those and other standards develop the information about the standards which are in use in the defense sector. So in the Eurofighter project, we have around 550 standards developed by EasyStan from metallic materials and hydraulic systems. In Rafale, we have around 300 standards in use, mainly from electric systems. In Gripen, 160 standards in use from metallic materials, various helicopter and engine products, but we don't have exact figures due to parallel use in civil and military aviation. And those around 70% of electric standards are used in the NH90 program. This is a program for the NATO standard helicopter developed by Airbus Helicopters. Around 300 PRANs in use, mainly from electrical and fastener components. Then the standards are involved in A400M aircraft, which by the transfer of standards selection from civil aircrafts to the defense, to the military aircrafts. And other types of usage of our standards in the military aircraft like C295 and A330 MRTT. As well as in the UAV Eurodrone, which are the common use of standards between A400M and Eurodrone. And here are some statistics of usage of our standards in the aircrafts, which are flying in Europe and all over the world, actually. So around 3,000 of aluminum rivet standards produced according to EasyStan PRNs, 6069, 6080, 6081, and 6101. Around 200,000 fasteners manufactured according to EasyStan PRNs as well. 100,000 of blind bolts per aircraft manufactured according to EasyStan PRNs 4613, 14, and 4538, and around 200 bearings manufactured per aircraft according to EasyStan standards, the same standard actually, and around 10,000 electrical connectors and circuit breakers manufactured according to EasyStan standards listed here. So I think that should be all. So I try to keep it straight to the point and in time. I hope I managed it in 15 minutes.
Yes, Pari, thank you very much. And actually, I know how hard it is, as you know, in the sequence, because it was a sequence of the presentations, to be like this, but the heavy duty to be one of the, of the speakers, the last speakers is always difficult to catch up the time and also to keep on the schedule. Thank you very much. First of all, a very impressive, wow, presentation of what we've seen, the real contribution of industry to European standardization, real with evidence, with numbers, with, tangible results. Congratulations. Also, a message from my part, my humble experience is all participants belong to industry. SMEs are invited to join EasyStan groups by, visiting the website and apply for participation or for membership, because it's really, as you can see, an added value to join these groups. You are actually developing the standards for the future. As you heard about the FCAT, a lot of projects, so you need to be on board. So the message is, the EasyStan is there, is waiting for you. Join EasyStan to increase your sustainability, your future business interoperability, to ensure and to safely invest your money and your products towards a common interoperable Europe. So congratulations, Pari. And also, this is strongly related to what Mr. Claudio Buccini said before. What I would have said, because I don't have a direct question for you, is that I would say another one also, I would say one of this assessment is we need ASD stand to be close to the EDSTAR and to the EDA, just to keep updated and relevant all standards. You mentioned more than 500 standards, which is a great, a remarkable number of standards. So you need to be closer there with the authorities to ensure the sustainability there, to be current, all the standards are relevant, and to be updated in the future. So congratulations. There are two, just one comment by Mr. David Strimshire, I'm sorry, David, that all the new AS EN 9100 series of standards will be published exclusively by SAE. It's a comment by
So
David.
it's true. It's true. There is a new process for the quality standards, and there will be the single publisher, which will be SAE, and the plan is that the standards in their next revision will be replaced by IA denomination, so they will become international standards. But for the moment, the process is still continues at the stand level, so we are still developing the quality standards and, well, not developing, but publishing those quality standards with the use of the members' contribution from ASD.
Great. So we have also a comment by Stefan Lauterbach that kindly joined EDSTAR too, as we mentioned before.
We are
Another
there.
comment, yes. Another one comment by also Dominic Kozer that if there's not related to your, if we have in NATO a similar like the EDSTAR, yes, we have the NATO standards development database, documents database, and with forums where we can see a lot of work by groups. You need to communicate with the Bundeswehr Office of Defense Planning in Berlin to have access to this database. So please communicate with the Bundeswehr Defense Planning Office in Berlin for further details, how you can have access, DIN members to this database. And from Torsten Lagenhan, with all the existing standards for aviation, are there standard guidelines available to explain when to apply what standard for a specific problem under what constraints? A very clever and very how critical questions. As you can see, the plethora of standards we have. Is there any, Pari?
I'm thinking there is a list of all the standards produced by ASD-STAN, which can be found at the ASD-STAN website first and at Sensenelec website as well. Those are the standards produced completely for the aviation industry, aerospace industry. But I don't know if they can answer the question when and in which circumstances they can be used. So for this, it's better probably to address the request for the companies which are developing those standards for their internal needs.
All right, great answer. But with regard to EDSTAR, in EDSTAR, all the standards included in EDSTAR, they are also supported by technical reports where they are saying where and under which circumstances can be used. But only for EDSTAR or apply to all aviation, you receive the answer for Paris. So great, thank you very much, Paris. And now I need your. Thank you very much. So I need now your understanding, flexibility for extending this virtual event just for 15 minutes. I will deliver very briefly the last presentation of best practices between stakeholders. And then we have a very short, round table around panelists for their last comment for this virtual event. So I would really request your flexibility and your time just to extend it for 15 minutes. And thank you for your understanding. I will share now my presentation regarding the best practices. This time, I hope that I will do it quickly. Or I think so. Do you see now my screen? Oh no, I'm sorry. Stop sharing first. So I will try to share share my screen, and then I will try to see to bring my presentation. So do you see now my full screen?
Yes.
So great. Thank you for your understanding. This is the last round of presentations here before the end of this virtual event. So actually now we will sum up some best practices, how we can include interoperability by design, what's said by Mr. Buccini, but also how the stakeholders can interact together for standards, for having access or work together in standards. The first one, the way that we presented in NATO some years ago, that and also in EDA, it's recognized that the stakeholders around standardization could be summarized into this slide. we have Defense and Security Administration, which means departments of defense and also protection of citizens and, fire brigades, police, and so on, coast guards. On the other hand, we have the SDOs and quality organization, because we need to have also conformity assessment and accreditation in this SIMA. And of course, the major stakeholders, industry, small, medium enterprises, market, and the academia and research and technology, which is really important to how to complete the picture of the stakeholders in civil and defense standardization. And all this community, they produce defense standards, civil or dual use hybrid standards. So these are the major stakeholders. How these stakeholders now, they can include standards into the design, by design, when they are building up capabilities. When a nation said, I want for PESCO this project, or I want a military capability in the future to respond to future operations or to the some security challenges now or nowadays in this with the war in Ukraine, then we need to build up within the capabilities, the requirements, interoperability requirements. So all nations, all parties, they should commit to a single set of interoperability requirements. And of course, we need also to have research and technology with us to see what is the future, to go more than the long-term, to go to the long-term capability requirements. If you want to identify the long-term capability requirements, LTCRs, which are more than 20 years, 25 years, you need also R&D with you. These two, you can see gears, they are moving the standards. So the interoperability requirements to develop standardization solutions. So these are the best practice solutions through a common set of interoperability requirements where all stakeholders have committed into the same interoperability requirements. So commitment is very important. Since we have the best practice standards, then the industry is very, how do you say, safely to invest and to go forward into a safe environment of producing real necessary equipment and interoperable equipment, which is not the case for the time being sometimes, as you heard before. And of course, research and technology by industry also drives backwards. It's a two-way system of gears. Research and technology by industry, and industry drives also the mechanism to the opposite side. So it's a dynamic process, but we need to have a commitment on interoperability requirements. So all stakeholders should sit on the same table, discuss, and to have a commitment about this capability-driven approach. And then this commitment will drive us to common set of standards. And of course, all stakeholders will have a safe, sustainable environment of investing, of producing, of being interoperable. That's the interoperability by design model, which presented as best practice to NATO and to European Defence Agency. It's easy? No. You need to go to the very early stages of the planning. And of course, you need always to have industry in your right hand to have an advice if it's realistic or not, because sometimes operational requirements do not have an advice in the very early stages by the industry. And that's the reason you see these deviations. This is the first picture. The same picture now is a simple questionnaire. Please keep this questionnaire with you, take it as a food for thought, or you can advise, take some advice from this questionnaire, how you can make your work easier for standards. These questions, you can see, if there's an MOU between an MOD by one country and the national SDO in place, it's not the case, believe me. Sometimes we don't have MOUs between the MOD or the Ministry of Protection with the SDO. It's very important. Why? Because we need to have access to standards, but we need also to engage in common projects. How we can influence, or how we can go to the market, how we can communicate with industry if we don't have an MOU, a cooperation model with our SDO. If there's, yes, if there's a MOU, is there a dedicated body established for this purpose? This is between the government and the NSB, the national body. The second question is if there's a national defense and security industrial strategy in place. It's not the case to all countries. And if so, does standardization synergies constitute a part of this strategy for engaging SMEs with government, SMEs, and the SDO? It's very important what all the challenges mentioned by Mr. Buccini. before, but also by Mr. Maglovsky or by Lichtenberg. It's very important to engage these people together. Do you develop national defense standard as an MOD or technical specifications in cooperation with your national SDO or your SMEs? Sometimes it's not the case in all nations. Do you have access by contract to suitable civil standards? This applies to the government, if they have access or contract to civil standards, or the SMEs, do they have the portfolio needed for their production line or their life cycle, mentioned by Mr. Buccini? Do they have a contract with the NSB or cooperation? Do they participate in technical committees? They are influencing standards in order to have an interoperability. At the same time, do you implement the provision of the EN 16341 or the order of priority so you can ensure sustainability? So this is between the governments and the SMEs. The SMEs should be trained and should establish a mindset for these best practice standards. Do you use EDSTA for your work projects? This applies to government and also to SMEs, to small and medium enterprises. They need to use EDSTA to ensure interoperability by design. Do you engage national defense industrial technological base in your program of work? This question applies to government, to the MODs and security, and to the NSB. We should engage. It's not one way. We cannot have the luxury to wait the industry to knock our door. We need to knock the door of industry. We need to encourage them. We need to change information, awareness products like we are doing today, to increase awareness and to make our cooperation more effective. And at the end, as I mentioned before, are there educational modules in place? Do you have it, as Mr. Buccini said, about EU court training activities, or about these awareness events, or the DSA offers some training, but also NATO, EDA, or nations are offering training. So we need to increase training in order to strengthen and enhance the mindset. And through the mindset, we will go to the interoperability by design. This is something after 25 years of experience in standardization in NATO, EDA, and national interoperability. This is an abstract of questions used also in EDA webinar. This is for you. You will receive it. Please think about it. If you find it valuable, you can use it as a questionnaire. But always training is a very important pillar. And that concludes, the final, the final presentations for this virtual event. What I would like to say is about the training. All these presentations can be found on the DSA website. Also, that if you want to join us for training events or for future awareness events, or for being associates for DSA, you are more than welcome to communicate with us to broaden up our, horizons and to bring all together into one, a board for a common purpose. So you are more than welcome. And that concludes my presentation. But also, I don't have any question. I've seen on the mailbox. I've seen one question about Paris, about the cooperation between ASD-STAN and EASA. But before going to this question, I know, Paris, that you need to leave in some few minutes. I will give the floor to all the panelists for a last comment before going to close to the closing remarks of this virtual event. So I will start from Paris because Paris has to leave first. So Paris, your last
Yes,
comment.
I don't want to leave, but I have to leave. I have another meeting.
I know.
Thanks, Nikolaos. Regarding the question, I don't remember who asked it about the UAS activities and the certification by EASA. EASA is a ASD-STAN member, so they contribute directly in the standardization activities. They can send comments, expertise, etc., and send the experts. On the part of the UAS, we support SENS and ELEC with a standardization request. So let's say like the drones were not the main area of expertise of ASD-STAN, but we opened the working group on the UAS when the standardization request was proposed to SENS and ELEC and was cascaded to ASD-STAN level to develop the standards on drones for the open categories. So those are 4 standards which are going to be published this year. and we have already the final draft in place, which will be transferred to SEN very soon for the formal vote and the publication of the EN. Then they will need to become the harmonized standards. Additionally, we contribute to the development of the next category of standards, which are 4 new standards in support of the drone regulation as well. And this is a joint work between ASDSTAN and Senelec again. I will not go into details because this is kind of a transitional phase between ASDSTAN activity to be transferred to SEN, and I think it's afterwards it will be best place to be answered by SEN, but the first standards are developed by ASDSTAN and will be published very soon. But for the other drone standard, there is another organization at EUROCAE which is also having the UAS community, UAS working group, and cooperate also with EASA on the development of the drone standards. I hope this covers quickly the question.
Completely. And any last, your last comment regarding the webinar?
Thanks, Nicolas, first of all, for the invitation and giving the possibility to increase the awareness about the work we do in support of the aerospace community, the industry, and all other stakeholders involved at ASDSTAN. Feel free to reach out to ask any questions. If I'm not an engineer, so if I don't answer them directly, I will coordinate this with our engineers participating in the working groups and come back to you with our answers. So feel free to reach out through Nicolas or through me directly. Thank you.
Thank you, Pari. And Mr. Buccini, Claudio, your turn for your last comment, or please.
First of all, thanks a lot, Nico, for this initiative. Very interesting, very well done, and thanks a lot again. I inform everybody that these presentations will be brought to the attention of the Services Commission of ASD first, and to the AIA, the Italian Association for Aerospace Industries, in a second place. As you understood, my focus is not on the standardization itself, because there are people and organizations which are doing a fantastic job on standards. I mean, Senelec and ASDSTAN, so that's okay. I don't want to modify anything at all on what they are doing, okay? For me, it is good. Only one point, as I said before, if our existing standards which are in conflict among them about the assessments given, please do something, because the world cannot foster this situation. Okay. Second, and important for me, is the need to understand together. UCOS initiative is a possibility to understand together how to manage the training in the same time, in the same way, for all the ones involved in European programs. I give also a highlight about the business possibilities that exist in doing something like this. If hundreds and thousands, I can't say thousands of people, have to be taught in the same way, at the same time, this means that European standardization organization have to do something, okay? That something, of course, will be rewarded in some way, also economically. UCOS is giving the way of this possibility, okay? So,
Great point. Thank you very much, Claudio. Great point.
Thanks a lot to you, Nico. Very well done.
Thank you. And we will continue on this. We will try to schedule more events in the future with tailored agendas. So thank you very much. You are all very precious for this. Now I will give the floor to Mr. Luc van den Berg. Luc, just your last round of an abstract comment.
Well, very short comments. I wanted to thank you, Nicolaus, also for having drawn attention in your stakeholders' engagement best practices. You have stressed again the importance of linking to the national standards bodies, because that's the way we operate. We are not top-down deciding from Senelec Management Center how things have to go. It's the national delegation principle, so it's our national standards bodies that bring things to us. And so also I would hope that this event may have helped a bit into, I would say, initiating again, re-initiating the discussion on a sector forum on defense standards. That would, I think, be very much appreciated. In relation to training, we do have regular webinars that cover all sectors. I think we have them today about every 2 weeks, but of course they cover all sort of subjects. But so I would be, I think we would be most welcome to have webinars addressing the defense sector needs. I will not comment further on the drones issue that was briefly touched upon by Pari, because I think this is not really for this tutorial webinar on standardization, and also I am insufficiently briefed as regards the details of this file.
Great.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Great honor for having all your distinguished lecturers. And last but not least, I will give the floor to Mr. McCloskey. Dieter, you know, you're starting first, so you're ending, you're closing this event. So the floor is yours for your final remarks. And
yeah, thank you, Nikolaos. First of all, you know, I would like to thank you for setting up this event here and for organizing it and inviting me to participate. What I would like to emphasize again, and that became, I think, also obvious today, and Mr. Buccini had a few really good examples. Yeah, if we are not, you know, improving coordination and cooperation amongst the various standardization stakeholders, in particular, of course, in the defense sector, yeah, we will continue to find areas where we have even conflicting standards, or where we find out in operations or in exercises that our military capabilities are not standardized to the effort required. And the last point I want to make, and I started that already this morning, when we look and discuss European standardization, we cannot look at it in isolation. We have to ensure that European standardization activities, when they relate to defense capabilities, that there we need good cooperation and coordination between the NATO defense standardization elements. That is really crucial. And the last point I want to make is, I think standardization in the defense area and defense domain has to be brought more to the attention of our political leaders. When I look, for instance, at the EU strategy on standardization, defense standardization is not mentioned at all. Yeah, but I think the current security environment makes it pretty clear and crucial that we pay attention, more attention to standardization in the defense domain. And discussions like this virtual event certainly help. But we all, I think, should try to also motivate our political leaders to pay more attention to defense standardization overall. And with that, you know, I would like to stop here and hand back to you, Nick. Thank you again.
Thank you very much. The last comment, that's for what you're saying, we try to bring here today also DG GROW, which is actually the custodians of the strategy, just to, you know, to raise this awareness of the necessity to further engage defense in this the strategy and the, you know, the activities. We hopefully will have them in the future, and also EDA, because they were engaged, but hopefully we'll have these two entities, fundamental entities for this effort here in the future. One comment was, and thank you very much, all of you. One last question was by Mr. Cambrai regarding if European defense processes for strengthening this process, defense security. Yes, there are some projects, but I cannot now talk about them because it's a remit of EDA, but definitely, yes, they have initiated processes to strengthen this process through the EDA. This is what I can only say. This is on the remit of EDA. Please contact EDA for further information on this. Hopefully, we'll bring all of them aboard in the next and the future awareness event. Once again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you all, lecturers, distinguished lecturers. Thank you very much for supporting and your efforts in making this event a success story. But not only you, but also the participants. We started with almost 200, and then even now with this time, which is, I know, a lot of other priorities, we're still a high number of participants. Thank you very much from the bottom of our hearts for embracing this event and for making this a truly success story. Hopefully, we try to transmit and communicate with you some important insights for this community, and stay tuned in the future for further educational and training events. Please contact us for any information or clarification might be needed. So once again, thank you all, both lecturers and participants. So enjoy the rest of the day, and all this material will be recorded and will be uploaded to the DSA website. Thank you.
Thanks.
So all the best.
Ciao.
Thank you.
Goodbye. All the best.